The amber light of dusk filtered through the cypress trees, casting long shadows across Willow Bend Plantation. Jefferson Davis Montgomery stood on his veranda, watching as the wagon approached along the dusty road. His purchase would arrive soon, the final auction of the season, and perhaps one of the last legal slave purchases in Mississippi, before the growing tensions between North and South erupted into something far worse. The year was 1857, and though Montgomery could not have known it, the nation stood on the precipice of a conflict that would tear it asunder. Montgomery was not like the other plantation owners of Natchez. He had come to his wealth through inheritance, but had expanded it through shrewd investments in shipping and cotton speculation rather than brutal field expansion. He was known for his peculiar habits, a fascination with science, a library filled with volumes from across the Atlantic, and a reputation for treating his human property with what passed for kindness in this corner of the South. This did not, of course, make him a good man. His fortune was built on stolen labor, his comfort purchased with others' suffering. But in the moral economy of antebellum Mississippi, he was considered enlightened. The wagon drew closer. Inside was a woman Montgomery had purchased sight unseen, described only as female, approximately 30 years, healthy, suitable for household duties. He had paid more than the market rate, a fact that had raised eyebrows at the auction house. But Montgomery had his reasons. Willow Bend needed another house servant, he said. His wife had been dead these past 5 years, and the house had fallen into a state of genteel decay that required attending to. When the wagon stopped before the main house, Montgomery descended the steps with measured dignity. The driver, a weathered white man with tobacco-stained teeth, tipped his hat. "Mr. Montgomery, sir," he said. "Your property as promised." The woman who climbed down from the wagon did not lower her eyes as Montgomery expected. She stood straight, her gaze level, her expression unreadable. She was tall for a woman, with skin the color of polished walnut and eyes that reflected nothing of what they saw. Her hands bore the calluses of hard work, but she carried herself with a dignity that Montgomery recognized as dangerous. "What is your name?" Montgomery asked. "They called me Sarah at the last place," she replied, her voice carrying the faintest trace of an accent Montgomery couldn't place. "But that is not your name." A flicker of something, surprise perhaps, crossed her features. "No, sir, it is not." "Then what shall I call you?" She paused, seeming to weigh her answer carefully. "Adama," she said finally. "My name is Adama." Montgomery nodded as though the matter was settled. "Adama, then. Come inside. Mrs. Winters will show you to your quarters and explain your duties." As she followed him up the steps, Montgomery felt a strange prickling at the back of his neck, the sensation of being studied, measured, assessed. He dismissed it as fancy. She was, after all, merely property, another soul to be bent to the machinery of Willow Bend. He could not have known that in purchasing Adama, he had brought destruction to his door. That within her resided a secret that would unravel the careful fabric of his world. That she had come to Willow Bend not by chance, but by design. The South of 1857 existed in a state of dangerous contradiction. Its economy depended on the enslavement of human beings, a system that had grown more entrenched, even as the moral opposition to it strengthened across the nation and abroad. Mississippi, with its fertile soil and access to river transportation, had become one of the wealthiest states in the Union on the backs of enslaved labor. The Cotton Kingdom reigned supreme, and those who questioned its foundations did so at great peril. Natchez, perched on bluffs above the Mississippi River, embodied these contradictions more than most places. Its upper town boasted mansions of extraordinary opulence, while its under-the-hill district harbored brothels, gambling dens, and the brutal machinery of the slave trade. It was a place where extreme refinement existed alongside extreme cruelty, where fortunes were made and souls were broken with equal efficiency. The Montgomery family had been in Natchez for 3 generations, arriving as the territory passed from Spanish to American control. They had prospered through each transition, adapting to new flags and new laws while maintaining their essential position. Jefferson Davis Montgomery, named for the future president of the Confederacy, who was then merely a Mississippi politician, represented the culmination of his family's ambitions, wealthy, respected and secure in his place in society. Yet beneath this security lay currents of fear. News from the North grew more troubling each year. Abolitionists grew bolder in their denunciations. The Fugitive Slave Act had provoked resistance rather than compliance in many northern states, and whispers circulated of slaves who disappeared, aided by an invisible network of sympathizers who guided them to freedom. These fears manifested in increasingly strict laws governing the enslaved population and those who might assist them in seeking freedom. In Mississippi, teaching a slave to read or write could result in imprisonment. Helping one escape could mean death. The state had become a fortress of slavery, its laws and customs designed to make the institution unassailable. It was against this backdrop that Adama arrived at Willowbend, carrying with her a purpose that she kept locked behind eyes that revealed nothing. Mrs. Winters, the plantation's housekeeper, was a thin, perpetually anxious white woman who had managed the household affairs since the death of Montgomery's wife. She regarded Adama with immediate suspicion. "Mr. Montgomery says you're to help with the household duties," she said, leading Adama through the main house. "Can you cook, sew, serve at table?" "I can do all those things," Adama replied. Her voice was low and melodious, with careful enunciation that spoke of an education she shouldn't possess. Mrs. Winters noticed. "Where'd you learn to talk like that? Your last master teach you?" Adama's expression remained neutral. "I listen. I learn." The housekeeper's eyes narrowed. "Well, you'd best unlearn any airs you've picked up. Mr. Montgomery runs a proper household. No ideas above your station." As they continued the tour of the house, Adama observed everything with quick, assessing glances. The layout of the rooms, the locations of doors and windows, the routines of the household staff. She noted the heavy silver displayed in the dining room, the paintings in gilt frames, the imported furniture that spoke of Montgomery's wealth, and she noted, too, the books in his study, hundreds of them arranged by subject, many with markers indicating recent reading. "You'll sleep in the servants' quarters behind the kitchen," Mrs. Winters explained. "Up at dawn, no exceptions. Sundays you'll have an hour for worship. Mr. Montgomery insists on it, though I can't see the point myself." Adama nodded, filing away each piece of information. That night, lying on the narrow pallet in the cramped room she would share with two other house servants, she closed her eyes but did not sleep. Instead, she recalled the face of a man she had known long ago, a face that bore a striking resemblance to Jefferson Davis Montgomery. In the darkness, she allowed herself a small smile. She had found him at last. Jefferson Montgomery prided himself on his powers of observation. As a collector of scientific curiosities and a student of the natural world, he had developed the habit of careful study. It was this habit that made him increasingly unsettled by his new purchase. Adama moved through the house with an efficiency that should have pleased him. She learned her duties quickly, performed them without complaint, and showed none of the reluctance or sabotage that sometimes accompanied new slaves adjusting to a household. Yet something about her presence disturbed him. Perhaps it was the way she seemed to be memorizing the house rather than merely working in it, or the way he sometimes caught her studying the family portraits that hung in the main hall, her eyes lingering on faces long dead. A week after her arrival, he found her in his study, dusting the bookshelves with methodical care. "Can you read?" he asked abruptly. Adama turned, her expression betraying nothing. "No, sir. You are looking at the books with interest. They are beautiful objects," she replied, "even to those who cannot understand their meaning." Montgomery approached the shelf she had been dusting. "This section contains accounts of the San Domingo Revolution. Are you familiar with that history?" "I have heard stories," she said carefully. "Have slaves who rose up against their masters, and were you inspired by these stories?" Adama met his gaze directly, a breach of etiquette that he allowed out of curiosity. "Those who live in chains will always dream of freedom, Mr. Montgomery, whether they hear such stories or not." It was a dangerous statement, one that could have earned her a whipping on most plantations. But Montgomery merely nodded, as if she had confirmed something he suspected. "My father visited San Domingo before the uprising," he said. "He brought back artifacts, a collection I've maintained. Would you like to see them?" The question was a trap, and they both knew it. No slave should express interest in objects associated with the only successful slave revolution in the Western Hemisphere. Yet Adama nodded. "If it would please you to show them, sir." Montgomery led her to a cabinet in the corner of his study. From it he withdrew a glass case containing a dagger with an ornately carved handle. "This belonged to a lieutenant of Toussaint Louverture," he explained, "or so the seller claimed. I've always wondered if it was used to kill a man like me." Adama studied the dagger through the glass. "It seems too fine a thing for killing." "Death often comes wrapped in beauty," Montgomery replied, "like poison in a crystal goblet." Their eyes met, and in that moment, something passed between them, a recognition that neither was precisely what they appeared to be. The air in the study seemed to thicken with unspoken understanding. "You may return to your duties," Montgomery said finally. As Adama left the room, Montgomery remained standing before the cabinet of revolutionary artifacts, wondering why he felt as though he had just engaged in a duel and was not certain he had won. That night he wrote in his journal, "The new woman Adama presents a puzzle. She carries herself with the bearing of someone educated, yet claims illiteracy. She speaks with care and intelligence beyond her station. Most troubling is the sense that she is here for some purpose beyond service. I find myself both disturbed by and drawn to this mystery." What Montgomery did not write, but found himself contemplating as he stared into the darkness of his bedroom, was how Adama reminded him of someone, a ghost from his family's past that he had never expected to encounter. Adama integrated herself into the rhythms of Willowbend with careful precision. She rose before dawn to help prepare breakfast, worked through the day cleaning, mending, and assisting with household management, and retired late after ensuring the dining room was prepared for the following morning. She was quiet but attentive, learning the habits of everyone in the household, especially Montgomery himself. She observed that he took coffee alone in his study each morning at precisely 8 o'clock, that he spent Tuesdays in town on business, and returned smelling of whiskey and expensive tobacco. That on Thursday evenings he hosted a small group of men for discussions that sometimes grew heated enough for raised voices to carry through the house. The other house servants provided information as well, though they didn't realize what they were revealing. There was Eliza, a woman in her 40s who had been at Willowbend since childhood and knew every secret passage and creaking floorboard. There was Samuel, Montgomery's valet, who had access to his most private spaces and correspondence. And there was Ruth, the cook, whose domain in the kitchen served as the central nervous system of the plantation, where information flowed as freely as the Mississippi River just beyond the property's edge. From them, Adama learned of Montgomery's past, his education at Harvard, his childless marriage to a delicate Boston woman who had withered in the Mississippi heat, his distant relationship with his younger brother who managed family interests in New Orleans. Most importantly, she learned of his father, the first Jefferson Montgomery, who had established the plantation after arriving from Virginia with a fortune of mysterious origin and a household of slaves he treated with unusual strictness. Old. Master was a hard man, Eliza told her as they polished silver one afternoon. Not like the current Mr. Montgomery. Old Master would have a man whipped for looking at him wrong. Had a special room built off the old barn where he'd take troublemakers. Some went in and never came out again. "What happened to that place?" Adama asked, keeping her voice casual. "Burned down 20 years ago. Young Master had it torn down after, said it was an abomination." Eliza glanced around and lowered her voice. "They say Old Master kept a woman there too. Not a slave, not exactly. Someone he brought back from his travels. She had a child, they say, though nobody ever saw it live." Adama's hand stilled briefly on the silver candlestick she was polishing. "What happened to her?" Eliza shrugged. "Disappeared. Some say she ran off. Some say Old Master got rid of her when she became inconvenient. Either way, it was before my time, just plantation ghost stories now." But Adama knew it was more than a ghost story. It was the beginning of the truth she had crossed an ocean and endured years of bondage to discover. As the weeks passed, Adama began the next phase of her plan. She needed access to Montgomery's private papers, documents she suspected were kept in a locked drawer in his study. To gain his trust, she employed a strategy that played to his intellectual vanity. One evening, as she brought a tray of coffee to his study, she deliberately left a book of astronomy open on his desk to a page she had been examining. "Do you find the stars interesting?" Montgomery asked, catching her glance at the book. Adama hesitated, then decided to abandon the pretense. "Yes, sir. I find them fascinating." "Yet you told me you cannot read." "I cannot read English well," she admitted, "but I can recognize the patterns of stars. They are the same in Africa as they are here." Montgomery's eyebrows rose. "You remember Africa?" "I was born there. Taken when I was 12. This was the first personal information she had volunteered, and she saw its effect on Montgomery." He gestured to a chair across from his desk, an unprecedented invitation for a slave to sit in his presence. "Which part of Africa?" he asked. "A coastal village in what the Europeans call Guinea," she replied, remaining standing despite his gesture. "My father was a man of knowledge among our people. He taught me to read the stars, to understand the cycles of the moon, to navigate by the heavens." Montgomery studied her with new interest. "And did he teach you other things as well?" Adama met his gaze steadily. "Many things. Some I have forgotten. Others I keep here." She touched her temple lightly. "Would you recognize the stars of your homeland if you saw them mapped?" "I would." Montgomery rose and crossed to a cabinet, withdrawing a large atlas. He opened it to a chart of the southern celestial hemisphere and laid it before her. "Show me." It was a test, and they both knew it. If she truly could not read, she would struggle with the complex chart. If she had been lying about her origins, she would not know the southern stars. Adama bent over the chart, her finger tracing constellations with confidence. "Here is what you call the Southern Cross. My people call it the Tree of Life. And here," her finger moved to another formation, "is what we call the Hunter's Spear." Montgomery watched her, fascination evident on his face. "You have an educated mind, Adama, a rare thing in your position." "Knowledge finds ways to survive, Mr. Montgomery, even in chains." The statement hung between them, fraught with implication. Montgomery closed the atlas slowly. "Perhaps we might continue this discussion another time. I find myself curious about your knowledge." "As you wish, sir." As Adama left the study, she knew she had planted a seed, one that would grant her greater access to Montgomery and, eventually, to the secrets he kept locked away. What she had not anticipated was the genuine interest that had flickered in his eyes. It complicated matters. Hatred was a simpler emotion to navigate than curiosity. That night, as she lay on her pallet pretending to sleep, Adama whispered a name to herself, a talisman against forgetting, against losing herself in the role she played. It was the name of the woman Eliza had mentioned, the one kept in the old master's special room, the woman who had disappeared. "Naya," she whispered, "I have found your son." Montgomery's interest in Adama grew in the weeks that followed. He began to summon her to his study in the evenings, under the pretense of having her clean or arrange books. In reality, these sessions became a strange form of intellectual exchange. He would read passages from scientific texts or historical accounts and ask for her perspective, testing the boundaries of her knowledge. Adama played a careful game, revealing enough to maintain his interest, but always presenting her understanding as intuitive rather than formally educated. She spoke of the medicinal plants her people used, the oral histories passed down through generations, the complex systems of governance that had organized her village. Each revelation was calculated to draw him further into her web, while giving her more opportunities to search for the evidence she sought. One evening, as autumn winds began to rattle the windows of Willowbend, Montgomery broached a subject they had circled, but never directly addressed. "Do you believe in justice, Adama?" he asked, swirling brandy in a crystal glass as he stood before the fire. "Justice takes many forms," she replied, "some immediate, some delayed. And vengeance? Is that a form of justice?" Adama considered her words carefully. "Vengeance satisfies the heart, but not always the soul. True justice restores what was broken." Montgomery turned to look at her, the firelight casting his face in sharp relief. "And what if restoration is impossible? What if what was broken can never be made whole again?" "Then justice becomes a matter of truth," she said. of bringing what was hidden into the light. He studied her for a long moment. You speak like someone with a purpose, Adama. I wonder what it might be. The air between them crackled with unspoken knowledge. Adama met his gaze without flinching. We all have purposes, Mr. Montgomery, even those who appear to have had choice taken from them. He nodded slowly, as if confirming something to himself. I think my father would have had you whipped for such words, or worse. And you, sir? What will you do? Montgomery returned to his desk and withdrew a key from his waistcoat pocket. He unlocked the drawer that had been the object of Adama's interest for weeks and removed a leather-bound journal. I will show you something I have shown no one else, he said. Because I believe you, of all people, might understand it. He opened the journal to a page marked with a silk ribbon and pushed it across the desk. On the page was a detailed sketch of a woman with features similar to Adama's. High cheekbones, full lips, eyes that seemed to challenge the viewer even from the page. Beside it was writing in a cramped, urgent hand. My father's journal, Montgomery explained. He was not a good man, though he presented himself as one to society. His private thoughts reveal much darker impulses. Adama's fingers hovered over the page, not quite touching it. The woman in the sketch wore a necklace identical to one Adama had carried, hidden among her few possessions since childhood. Who is she? Adama asked, though she already knew the answer. Her name was Naya, Montgomery said. According to my father's writings, she was the daughter of a chief or holy man from the Guinea coast. She was not purchased, but taken directly by my father during a trading expedition in 1825. He kept her separate from the other slaves, in a building at the edge of the property. Why are you showing me this? Montgomery's expression was troubled. Because you remind me of her. Not just in appearance, but in the way you carry yourself, the way you speak. And because I have lived with the weight of my father's sins for too long without confession. Adama carefully turned the page. The next entry described Naya's pregnancy and the birth of a son. The writing grew increasingly agitated, speaking of the child as both a source of pride and shame. What happened to them? Adama asked, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions within her. My father claimed she escaped, taking the child with her. He mounted a search but never found them. I was 10 years old at the time. I remember the night she disappeared. There was a storm, and in the morning my father was in a rage unlike any I had seen before. He burned her building to the ground himself. Montgomery closed the journal and returned it to the drawer, locking it once more. I have often wondered if she truly escaped, or if my father's temper finally broke with devastating consequences. He was not a man who tolerated defiance. And the child? Did you never see it? Never. But I found this among my father's effects after his death. He withdrew a small pouch from the same drawer and emptied its contents onto the desk. A tiny bracelet of woven grass and shells lay between them. It would have fit an infant's wrist. Adama stared at the bracelet, recognizing the pattern of the weaving, a protection charm from her village. Her mother had taught her how to make them before she was taken. My father died believing his bloodline would continue only through me, Montgomery said. But I sometimes wonder if I have a half-brother or sister living in freedom somewhere in the north. It is a strange thought. And if such a person existed, Adama asked carefully, what would you do? Montgomery's eyes met hers. I would want to know the truth, whatever it might be. As Adama left the study that night, her hands trembling slightly with suppressed emotion, she knew the time for revelation was approaching. Montgomery had shown her the journal, but she needed to examine it more thoroughly, to find the final pieces of evidence that would complete the story she had crossed an ocean to uncover. The opportunity came sooner than she expected. The following Tuesday, Montgomery departed for his usual business in town. A violent storm moved in by midday, with thunderheads building over the Mississippi and lightning splitting the sky. By late afternoon, when Montgomery would normally be returning, the roads had become nearly impassable. A messenger arrived at dusk, informing Mrs. Winters that the master would remain in Natchez overnight. Adama knew this was her chance. After the household retired for the night, she slipped from the servants' quarters and made her way through the darkened house to Montgomery's study. The lock on his desk drawer presented little challenge. She had been picking such mechanisms since childhood, a skill taught by an uncle who had insisted knowledge of all kinds held value. With the journal in hand, She moved to the window where moonlight breaking through the storm clouds provided just enough illumination to read. The entries spanning 1825 to 1827 told the story she sought, the story of her mother, Naya, and the child born of Montgomery's father's violence. The journal revealed that the elder Montgomery had become increasingly unstable as the child grew. The boy showed none of his father's features, taking after his mother entirely. This had enraged the old man, who began to doubt the child was his. His entries grew more paranoid, more violent in their language. And then came the final entry, dated April 17, 1827. The ungrateful witch attempted escape tonight. I caught her at the river's edge with the boy. When I moved to take him from her, she drew a blade, my own letter opener stolen from my desk. The injury she inflicted was minor, but her defiance could not stand. I acted in self-defense and the necessity of maintaining order. The problem of the body was solved by the convenience of the Mississippi's currents. The boy I have sent with Willard to be sold in New Orleans. He will fetch a good price despite his tainted blood. Thus ends an ill-conceived experiment. No record of either will remain at Willowbend. Adama closed the journal, tears streaming silently down her face. After all these years, she had confirmation of what village elders had pieced together from fragments of information, that her mother had been murdered and her infant brother sold away. The journal provided the final piece, New Orleans as the destination. She had just replaced the journal in the drawer when the study door opened. Montgomery stood there, rain-drenched and mud-splattered, his expression unreadable. "The road's cleared enough for travel after all," he said quietly. I returned to find a light in my study window. Adama made no attempt to hide what she had been doing. I needed to know the truth. And did you find it? Your father murdered my mother and sold my brother as an infant. Montgomery showed no surprise at her declaration. He moved into the room, closing the door behind him. When did you begin to suspect our connection? I never suspected, Adama replied. I knew. My mother was taken from our village when I was a child. Years later, a trader who had been to Natchez spoke of a woman from our tribe, kept by a plantation owner named Montgomery. I have spent 15 years working my way to this place to discover what happened to her. 15 years, Montgomery repeated. Her remarkable dedication. She was my mother. Montgomery sank into a chair, suddenly looking older than his years. The boy, your brother, would be 30 now if he lives. His name is Kofi, Adama said. In our language it means born on Friday. I have searched for him as well, but the trail went cold in New Orleans. And now that you know the truth about your mother, what do you intend to do? The question hung in the air between them. Outside, thunder rumbled, a low counterpoint to the tension in the room. Justice, Adama said simply. I came for justice, Montgomery nodded slowly. I expected as much. Will you kill me then? As retribution for my father's crime? You are not your father. No, he agreed. But I have benefited from his crimes. This plantation, this wealth, all built on stolen lives, including your mother's. Adama moved toward him, her posture straight and proud. I do not want your death, Jefferson Montgomery. I want your help. Help me find my brother. Help me tell the world what happened here. Help me make right what can still be made right. Montgomery studied her face in the flickering lamplight. You ask the impossible. To do as you request would mean the end of everything I have known. My position, my place in society. Yes, Adama agreed. Just as my mother's abduction ended everything she had known. A long silence stretched between them. Finally, Montgomery stood and crossed to a painting that hung on the wall, a portrait of his father, in his prime, stern-faced and imperious. He removed it, revealing a small safe built into the wall. After working the combination, he withdrew a stack of papers. These are the deeds to Willowbend, he said, along with banking documents and other legal papers. He held them out to Adama. If I am to help you, we must trust each other. You hold my future in your hands now, as I have held yours. Adama took the papers, understanding the significance of the gesture. And my brother? I have connections in New Orleans. If records of his sale exist, we will find them. If he lives, we will locate him. And the truth about my mother? Montgomery's expression grew troubled. That is more complex. To reveal my father's crime would send shockwaves through Natchez society. It would also put you in grave danger. Mississippi does not look kindly on slaves who seek justice from their masters. I did not cross an ocean and endure 15 years of bondage to hide the truth, Adama said firmly. No, Montgomery agreed. I suppose you didn't. He was quiet for a moment, then added, there is another option, one that would allow for both justice and survival. I'm listening. We leave tonight. Take what valuables can be carried, enough money to establish ourselves elsewhere. Go north, perhaps to Boston, where I have some distant connections, or even to Canada. There we can document your mother's story safely. Seek legal recourse through northern courts, and continue the search for your brother without fear of southern retribution. Adama considered his proposal. You would abandon everything? Montgomery gestured to the plantation beyond the window. What is all this worth, measured against the truth you have shown me? I have lived in the shadow of my father's crimes long enough. Perhaps helping you is my path to redemption. The plan took shape quickly. They would take Montgomery's private carriage, traveling under the cover of night while the storm provided distraction. They would follow the river north, using Montgomery's connections to secure passage by steamboat once they were safely beyond the immediate reach of Mississippi law. The deeds and banking papers would allow them to access funds from northern banks, giving them the resources needed for their search. As dawn broke, a strange party departed Willow Bend Plantation. Jefferson Montgomery, the respected plantation owner, Adama, legally his property, but now his partner in an extraordinary quest, and Samuel, Montgomery's valet, who had chosen to join them rather than remain behind. They carried with them the journal that documented an atrocity, the small grass bracelet that had belonged to Adama's brother, and the hope that somewhere in the vastness of America, a man named Kofi might still be found. The story of their flight from Mississippi caused a sensation when it reached Natchez days later. Some claimed Montgomery had been bewitched or coerced. Others whispered of madness running in the family. None guessed the truth, that he had chosen justice over privilege, truth over comfort, redemption over continuation of a blood-stained legacy. Jefferson Davis Montgomery and Adama were never seen again in Mississippi. Their carriage was found abandoned near Memphis, leading some to conclude they had met with foul play. But far to the north, in a modest home on the outskirts of Boston, a man known as James Daniels and his wife Sarah began collecting accounts of those who had escaped slavery, documenting their stories for posterity, and quietly funding the activities of abolitionists who helped others find freedom. Among their papers was a leather-bound journal and a faded sketch of a woman named Naya, whose defiance in the face of oppression had sparked a journey of justice that spanned decades and crossed oceans. And in the home's small garden grew plants native to the Guinea coast, tended by hands that remembered the teachings of a village far away, a living memorial to a mother who had never stopped fighting for freedom. In the spring of 1859, a letter arrived at the Daniels home from a correspondent in Toronto. It spoke of a man who made musical instruments of remarkable quality, whose techniques were unlike any seen in North America, drawing instead on African traditions. The craftsman went by the name Francis, but was said to have been born with another name, one that meant born on Friday. As Adama read the letter, her hands trembled with a hope long deferred. Montgomery, now James, placed a supportive hand on her shoulder. "We'll leave for Toronto tomorrow," he said simply. Adama nodded, too overcome with emotion to speak. After 32 years, the circle begun with her mother's abduction was about to close. The family torn apart by the brutal machinery of slavery might finally be reunited, and the truth her mother had died to preserve, would continue to spread like ripples across still water, touching lives far beyond the boundaries of Willow Bend Plantation. Jefferson Davis Montgomery's purchase of what he believed was merely another piece of property had indeed revealed a dark secret, not of the woman he bought, but of his own inheritance. In choosing to confront that darkness rather than perpetuate it, he found something his wealth and position had never provided: the possibility of redemption. As for Adama, her journey was not one of revenge but of restoration. In seeking justice for her mother, she created the possibility of healing for future generations. The truth she uncovered did not change the past, but it transformed the future, a future in which the stories of those like Naya would not be forgotten or erased, but would stand as testament to the enduring human spirit and its unquenchable thirst for freedom. The fall of Willow Bend, For the plantation did eventually collapse without its master, divided among creditors and distant relations, represented in microcosm the coming collapse of the system it had embodied. Within 5 years of Adama and Montgomery's flight, the nation would be engulfed in a war that would ultimately end legal slavery. But for one woman from the Guinea coast and the son of the man who had wronged her, the path to justice could not wait for history's slow progress. Their personal rebellion, like countless others lost to official records but preserved in family memories, formed a current that helped turn the river of history toward liberation. In a Toronto workshop, filled with the scent of freshly worked wood and the soft sounds of strings being tuned, a brother and sister who had never known each other prepared to meet. On the wall hung a small frayed bracelet of woven grass and shells, a protection charm from a village an ocean away, preserved against all odds as a link between generations. And in that moment, across the gulf of time and suffering, the spirit of a woman named Naya, who had died rather than surrender her child or her dignity, was finally at peace. The true secret of Willowbend had never been buried in its soil or hidden in its master's safe. It had lived in the memories of those who refused to forget, in the determination of those who sought justice regardless of the cost, and in the human capacity to choose a different path, even when born into systems that denied such choice. It was the secret that all who profit from oppression fear most, that truth once uncovered cannot be reburied, and that justice, though it may be delayed, arrives with the inevitability of dawn following the darkest night.